Hey Cardfighters, Chris here from Vanguard Central. I have a Dragonic Overlord, the Cross, or the X, whatever you like to call it, build. And just want to preface this by saying this build is a little unconventional, but it's been working really well for me. I've been topping a lot of my local tournaments. So I'll just go into the deck now. Obviously we are running 4 Dragonic Overlord, the Cross. For those that don't know the effect, when you Legion, you can search for a copy of a unit on the Vanguard Circle, and it legions with Dragonic Overlord, the End. So you can either get a copy of the Cross or the End. And the second effect is when you attack and you don't hit, when you attack and you don't hit, you can counterblast 1 and Persona Blast the Cross, and then you can choose 2 of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. So that works well with its Revival Legion with Dragonic Overlord, the End. So the End's effect is if you hit, you can counterblast 2 and Persona Blast the End to restand. So this kind of puts your opponent in a lose-lose situation where if they guard, they lose 2 rear guards from the Cross, or if they let it hit, then you get a restand from the End. And the Legion effect, where you get to search out either one of these, can either bait your opponent into falling for one, or set up one where you know they can't guard, say the End, you can just grab one and get that free restand. Alright, so then we're running, alright, so one other thing is we're only running 3 the End, because running 4 is a little bit much, I think. Since you can search him out, you really don't need more than 3. Sometimes there's issues where you have them like 2 in the damage. That could be problematic, but it's generally not a problem to run 3, so that's that. So we do run 2 other grade 3s, and that's Dragonic Overlord Break Ride. And we're running the Break Ride because it's really good if you're getting aggroed early. Then you can ride this and then recover using the Break Ride effect, which is when you Break Ride, give the Vanguard plus 10,000, and after you attack a rear guard, you can counterblast 1 and drop 1 card, and then restand. So overall, you get 1 extra card from the extra twin drive. And another bonus is that it acts as a cross ride for Dragonic Overlord, the End. And you don't get defensive power boost from it, but you do get an offensive power boost, which bumps your Legion up to a 24, which does hit for numbers versus 9k rear guards. So that's what the grade 3s. The grade 2s, we're running 3 of Perdition Dragon Ilham. This card is amazing because every time you Legion, you can choose an opponent's rear guard in the same column as this unit and retire it for free, no counterblast needed. And with the Cross decks, you're actually going to be re-legioning the Cross a lot because you can Legion, get another copy of the Cross, and then use that the next turn to Legion again. So it just free retires over and over if your opponent doesn't deal with this card. So it can really snowball the game. But since it doesn't work until you Legion, we're only running at 3. Next is 3 Berserk Dragon, good old Kaido classic. This is also another anti-rush card because if they call out too many rear guards, then you can counterblast 2, retire 1, and then swing at the other, just to kind of stall your opponent's offensives till you can recover. This is good in certain scenarios, and the ones that aren't is covered by our next card, which is Perdition Dragon Dragonic Neoflame. And his effect is when you call it to rear guard, it gains an ability just for that turn, which is if a unit is put into the drop zone in the same column, your opponent's unit is put into the drop zone in the same column as it, then you can counterblast 1 and retire a unit in another column. So this one's good if they call out an extra column to attack you with early. Then you can call this one in that same column and then attack the front row rear guard. And then if it hits, you just counterblast 1 and hit the back row retire the back row one as well. So mainly in the deck just to kind of stifle early assaults, as well as if you can get the effect off late game, it's good at really just cleaning up your opponent's entire board. And then the last grade 2 we run is 2 of Twilight Arrow Dragon. And his effect is Generation Break 1. When he's attacking you boost, you can counterblast 1 and retire any unit. And so that's good just for doing some little cheap pinpoint retires when your opponent's playing around the crosses effect, where he's just going to let it hit because he doesn't want to lose some rear cards. So you just could pinpoint retire, but it only works on Generation Break 1. So we're only running it 2 because it's not always going to be active for us. So going into the grade 1s, we're running 4 Perdition Dragon and Rampart Dragon as our perfect guards. We don't run the new unflipping perfect guards in this deck particular just because it's really bad. It's not really bad, but it is advantageous to have these perfect guards when you're facing the mirror match, just because if they swing at a rear guard, the unflipping perfect guards can't guard those. So you either have to drop a lot of cards or just let it hit and give them the free restand. So this gives us an advantage in the mirror match when we're running them and our opponent is not. So that's why we run these instead of the unflipping ones. It does... Some people might say that it gives some counterblast issues, like you don't get to unflip as much, but I think if you really pay attention to what you're using it and don't go crazy, then you'll be fine. So next we run 4 of the Stride Fodder cards. There's no Dragonic Dragonic Blade Masters, thinking Narukami unit, in the deck, so obviously it's really only a 7k vanilla or Stride Fodder. But the Stride Fodder is really useful because in this deck in particular, sometimes you're on the break ride and you're not at limit break, so you can just stride over and over again to kind of filter out cards from your hand, try to hit some more triggers and get some free retires and effects off of them. So really good card just to stride without using of your grade 3s that you might want to use for the crosses effects or the end effects. So next you run 3 Eternal Bringer Griffin. His effect is when you call it to rear guard, you can reveal a grade 3, and not just reveal it, but you also discard it. And then you search your deck for a Dragonic Overlord and put it into your hand. So we run 3 of him because it allows you to search out the break ride if you really need it. So say you're being aggroed early, you can use this to get out the break ride and try to recover a little bit. But the main purpose is because you don't really want to be stuck on the end. And don't get me wrong, the end is a really strong card, but in current power levels, the current power creep, it's not as good as it once was, so you really want to try to avoid riding it. So this can help you get out of riding it and get on the break ride, which will let you recover later in the game. So then the last 2 grade 1s we're running are Dragonic Gaius. This fills the soul blasting spot that most the cross builds would run Calamity Tower. So Calamity Tower and then re-legion the cross, and then Calamity Tower, re-legion the cross. But I like Dragonic Gaius because it adds some pressure where you are swinging like 22k and a crit every single turn. And it also, if their opponent leaves this on the field or if they can't retire it, it's like infinite Calamity Tower. So you can re-legion every single turn for the rest of the game. Getting free retires off of Ilham if it's out, and just putting back triggers and perfect guards and anything you need in the deck every single turn. Kind of like, if they can't deal with it, then it just gives you that inevitability. And then lastly, our starter is Lizard Soldier Fargo. This is great because it lets you get some extra pressure. So sometimes I like to run this deck where every time I'm attacking with my Vanguard, there's some kind of pressure, whether it's the stride on hit effects, or the crosses or the end effects. And you don't always get that. Like say if you stride Root Flare, you can retire a column, but then nothing bad's gonna happen to them if they let it hit. So that's like their opportunity to take damage and save some cards for when it really matters. But then you can use this because they keep their Heart's Name, so it'll still be an Overlord. So you can use this to make Root Flare just like Mahmud, and just keep up that pressure on them, which I find really great. I don't run Red Pulse because I run the Turtle Bringer Griffin instead, the one that searches out the Break Ride. And it hasn't been that much of a problem. I don't usually have to ride the end, so it works out pretty well. And I find that Fargo is much more useful because he usually acts as a 1-for-1, and sometimes Red Pulse misses, so that's pretty bad. So then going into the triggers, we're running 6 crit and 6 draw. Obviously running 4 Gatling Claw because some decks are so starter reliant. If you can snipe that out, like if you can kill Judge Bow, that makes your time against Revengers just so much easier. So gotta have 4 of these guys just to help out those starter reliant decks. And then obviously 4 heals. So lastly, just gonna talk about the Generation Zone, which is pretty straightforward. We're just running the 4 Root Flare to get a free column retire, which can really put you ahead of your opponent. Gonna stifle their assaults and just insane 2 retires for no counterblast. And then like I said with Fargo, you can add even an on-hit pressure after you retire one of their columns. So great card. And then we are running 4 of Mahmud's Divine Dragonite Mahmud. His effect is when you hit, then you get a retire unit for free. So that's just a little early pressure. If they let it hit, you get a free retire. And we don't run an Atmos just because this deck is pretty counterblast heavy, just because they don't run any unflipping sources, and so you really have to manage that. And so there are some scenarios where Atmos would have been great, just because my opponent didn't have a perfect guard and I could have just used Atmos and just crushed their hand. But overall, I found like you don't need him a ton, so just having that extra pressure is usually better.